Welcome back to my Unreal Engine 5 Tetris-Like tutorial using C++. Today we're talking about UI. So as you can see, it's actually working now. Look at that. What do you know? And I also found out that apparently it wasn't a bug. It was just something I was doing wrong. Um, it was kind of like the way that I learned to do it was set up for a different type of game that I'm building now. Um, so I'll get into it later, but the issue I was having had to do with the fact that I had a game mode, but I also had a player pawn that I had drug into the level. But yeah, we'll get into more detail in a second. Let's go over what I did. So, the cube. That's just for the maps. Okay, so we won't go into the player board first. Let's look at the HUD. So in the HUD, I was adding the widget to the viewport in the HUD in begin play, but that does not work well for the way that I had this set up. What I found out is if I set the game up this way, the way that I stopped, and I deleted this out and let the game mode spawn a pawn class for me, then it would work. But if I did like what I had done and took my player board blueprint and drug it in and then played like this, it would not work. So I would be making calls to, I think, a pawn class that didn't exist, and I was getting null reference exceptions. And I figured it out just kind of by accident. Where's my code? Um, I think I did like a right click play from here or something like that, and then I saw the widget was working. I was like, wait a minute, what the hell? But yeah, so so what I'm doing now is I created a get tetramino HUD widget function, and instead of doing all this stuff in begin play, I'm just creating the widget and returning it using the function, but I'm passing in the player controller rather than using this get world get first player controller like I was previously. So now it doesn't matter which way I actually call it, as long as I do this add to viewport line in the actual player board itself, which I am now doing in begin play. There it is. Yeah, add to viewport. But since the location of the player board actually does matter, the other thing I needed to set up was I needed to make sure that the actor location and rotation of the player board were set in begin play so that no matter where I place the board, it will zero out the rotation and set it at the correct spot. That's very important for the world dependent way that I set up the slices and everything. But then in tick, well, let's go down. We'll finish up begin play. So then after I set the location and rotation of begin play, just below that in under initialize queue, I grab the controller, the player controller ref, just using the get controller that all actors have. I'm casting it to a player controller. And then, so if it exists, then I'm grabbing a reference to the HUD. I had to create this HUD ref. That is over in playerboard.h. So HUD ref here. I also converted, I set these up as T object pointers. I think that's the correct way that you're supposed to set up pointers in Unreal Engine these days. I learned that in a different like Udemy course that I'm taking. So instead of U tetracube HUD widget star, it's supposed to be T object pointer passing in the U tetracube HUD widget, and that's how you should do that's how you should do those declarations. Is what I'm trying to say. So like here, this is no longer the right way to do it. I should probably go through and fix those soon, but everything's working right now. I didn't really want to mess with it. But yeah, so back to the player board, playerboard.cpp. So yeah, we're still in begin play here. So we have a reference to the HUD. Now we're getting a tetracube HUD widget. That is the T object pointer that I set up over here that I just pointed to. And now I'm calling the HUD ref get tetracube HUD widget, and then I pass in the player controller ref, and then I'm going add to viewport using the tetracube HUD widget that I just created that's attached to that player controller ref, which is this player controller. And then from there, once we have the tetracube HUD widget in tick, I'm just making sure that it's not a null pointer, and then setting the timer text using passing in the ukismet system library, this K2 get timer remaining handle. You just pass in, I think it's a world object that it's looking for, and then the time handler, and it'll give you back the time remaining, or it'll give you the float time remaining in form of an F text. Let's go back over here and player board, go up to tick. So yeah, now with IntelliSense, oh, this returns a float. Never mind. So K2 get timer remaining time handle, passing in the world context object. Okay, so I was right about that. And then the timer handle. And then that will give you the time remaining in a float. Set timer text passes in a float. And then from there, I'm using ukismet text library, convert double to text, and this returns an F text. So then the time float is what I'm passing over, and then the E rounding mode. This is kind of complicated. There's like multiple rounding modes, but basically to 0 is to get as close to 0 as possible. Rounds the value to which is closer to 0. Smaller is an absolute value. 0.1 becomes 0, negative 0.1 becomes 0. I found that gave me the best results for the trailing zeros and everything. And then basically the same thing for the active slice. Passing in the float, F text as number, active slice. I'm actually wondering, as number, I forget why I did it this way instead of, I think it was because I wanted the rounding mode is why I used convert double to text. $32 minimum fraction digits. Oh, yeah, it is why I use that, because the very last thing you're seeing here, minimum fraction digits, it defaults to 3, and I figured that was good enough for me, or maximum fractional digits. I didn't want it to be like a shitload of trailing zeros and stuff like it is if I just passed in the float, and that's what I would have gotten if I used F text as number. So yeah, that's why I'm using convert double to text. Okay. Yeah, things I set up forever ago. The only other thing I changed, this isn't necessary, but just for like naming convention, this used to just be named time. So if you're following along, I had to change this here and I changed it in blueprints. And the only reason I did that was because one, when I moused over it, it would give me a whole bunch of references to like time all over the engine. But I think it was confused about what I meant by time. It seemed like it was a protected keyword, even though it wasn't like throwing any errors or causing any problems. I just figured I'd be more explicit and call it time number text, considering this one I called it active slice number text. So I figured that would be more consistent to use time number text. But don't forget, if you do change that also, you have to change that in the blueprint, or it's using this name to to wire up which one goes to which field in the blueprint. All right, so we covered the HUD widget. We're calling it, passing it the time remaining for the timer text, and then the active slice text. Okay, so active slice it's a whole number, but it's in Unreal units / centimeters. So every time I go up a slice, I have to move it 100 units. That's the size of a block. But since I just want the time, or I want the slice to come across as just a regular number instead of 100, I just want it to be 1. All I did is I just divided by 100 to get like an actual slice number. And that pretty much covers it. I didn't do any more logic. So I think the only thing left to do is set up the line scanner. But like I mentioned before, since I set up the UI that way and we're using a game mode override with a default pawn class, I don't even have to have that player board dragged into the level anymore. I can just hit play and everything works now. So I'm not sure if this is like the best way to do it. Because like this seems like it's more the type of thing you would set up if you wanted to have like a player pawn like in a shooter or something where the pawn could get killed but the player is still technically alive. It would just respawn another thing, whereas in this I'm never actually going to kill the player board. It's just gonna always be the same thing. So I think I kind of went in a like too much of a roundabout way. I probably could have just handled all this stuff in the player board pawn. But yeah, I was just kind of learning it as I went. But here we go. We have a working UI now. The last thing I wanted to do was I think I wanted to remove the G engine. Yeah, because these anymore. Yes, go ahead, save. Because this is helpful when I need to know what status I'm in, but now it's just covering up the HUD widget. So let's go ahead and see it without the statuses there. Oh, and then I'll call it a day. Okay, we're back. Beautiful. Now we no longer have any statuses and stuff. So I don't know, at some point maybe I'll make this UI look fancier. I mean, I basically just did the most bare bones thing I could think of, putting a border around some text with a black background. But I'm no artist. You'll see that once I start trying to make my own assets for a game, which is something that I am interested in doing. But we'll see how that goes. But for now, I'm just gonna end this here. When we come back, we'll do clearing lines, and then I don't know where I want to take this. I was thinking about doing like a weather patterns thing. I did find a course on Udemy that talks about dynamic weather. I definitely want to do something with the background beyond just, have a cloudy background or something. That's just comes default with the project. But I am going to end this here. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one.